History is often seen as a fixed story, a collection of facts we can rely on. But what if I told you that some of the most famous historical facts you've been taught are completely wrong? For centuries, historians believed the Earth was flat. Vikings wore horned helmets, and Marie Antoinette callously declared, "Let them eat cake." But here's the twist: none of these are true. These are just a few examples of how history, as we know it, has been rewritten time and time again. Welcome to a journey through 30 times historians were proven wrong. From ancient myths to modern misconceptions, we'll explore how new discoveries, fresh perspectives, and even outright hoaxes have turned long-held beliefs on their heads. Get ready to question everything you thought you knew about the past, because history is far more mysterious and far more fascinating than it seems. Stay tuned, because by the end of this video, you'll see history in a whole new light. Now turning to our first example, let's tackle one of the most enduring myths in history, the idea that medieval Europeans believed the Earth was flat. This misconception has been repeated so often that it's become almost a cultural shorthand for ignorance. But here's the truth: medieval scholars were well aware that the Earth was round. In fact, the belief in a flat Earth was never a widespread medieval idea. Instead, it was a myth popularized in the 19th century, largely by writers like Washington Irving and Andrew Dixon White, who used it to paint the Middle Ages as a time of backwardness and superstition. The reality is that ancient Greek scholars like Eratosthenes and Ptolemy had already calculated the Earth's curvature centuries before the medieval period. Eratosthenes, for example, famously measured the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy around 240 BCE. Ptolemy's work, which included detailed maps and astronomical observations, further reinforced the idea of a spherical Earth. These ideas were preserved and studied by medieval scholars who built on this knowledge rather than rejecting it. So how did the flat Earth myth take hold? It was largely a product of 19th century debates between science and religion. Writers seeking to promote the triumph of modern science over what they saw as medieval ignorance exaggerated the idea of a flat Earth to make their point. This narrative stuck, even though it was based on a distortion of history. Modern historians have since debunked this myth, showing that the medieval world was far more intellectually sophisticated than we often give it credit for. This example reminds us that history is not always what it seems, and that even the most widely accepted facts can be built on shaky foundations. As we move forward, we'll uncover more instances where historians have had to rewrite the story of our past. Now turning to our second example, let's explore the fascinating story of the Trojan War, a tale long dismissed as pure myth until archaeology stepped in to rewrite the narrative. For centuries, the Trojan War was considered nothing more than a legendary story, immortalized in Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Historians and scholars viewed it as a work of fiction, a poetic creation rather than a historical event. But that all changed in the late 19th century, thanks to the work of a determined amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann. Schliemann, inspired by Homer's vivid descriptions, set out to prove that the Trojan War was more than just a myth. In the 1870s, he began excavating a site in modern-day Turkey near the Dardanelles. What he uncovered was nothing short of groundbreaking, the ruins of an ancient city that matched Homer's descriptions of Troy. Schliemann's discovery included massive walls, evidence of destruction by fire, and even treasures he famously dubbed Priam's treasure, after the legendary king of Troy. While some of Schliemann's methods and conclusions have been criticized, his work undeniably shifted the debate. Suddenly, the Trojan War wasn't just a story, it was a historical possibility. This discovery sparked intense debates among historians. Was the Trojan War a real event, or was Schliemann's Troy simply a city that inspired the myth? Over time, further excavations and research have revealed that the site Schliemann identified as Troy was indeed a significant ancient city, with layers of occupation spanning thousands of years. Evidence of conflict and destruction in one of these layers, dating to around 1200 BCE, aligns with the traditional timeline of the Trojan War. While we may never know the full truth, the archaeological evidence suggests that Homer's epic tales were rooted in historical events, even if they were embellished over time. The rediscovery of Troy has profoundly reshaped our understanding of ancient texts. It reminds us that myths and legends often contain kernels of truth waiting to be uncovered. As we continue our journey through history's greatest misconceptions, this example serves as a powerful reminder that even the most fantastical stories can have a basis in reality. Now turning to our third example, let's tackle one of the most enduring images of the Vikings, the horned helmet. When you picture a Viking, chances are you imagine a fierce warrior with a horned helmet, ready to raid and conquer. But here's the surprising truth: Vikings never actually wore horned helmets. This iconic image is a complete myth, one that was invented centuries after the Viking Age had ended. The idea of Vikings wearing horned helmets can be traced back to the 19th century, when artists and playwrights began romanticizing Norse culture. One of the key figures behind this misconception was Richard Wagner, the famous composer. In his operas such as The Ring Cycle, Wagner's costume designers outfitted Viking characters with dramatic, horned helmets to make them look more imposing and theatrical. These operas were wildly popular, and the image of the horned Viking quickly spread, becoming a staple of art, literature, and eventually modern media. But what did Vikings actually wear on their heads? Archaeological evidence tells a very different story. Excavations of Viking burial sites and settlements have uncovered a variety of helmets, but none of them feature horns. Instead, Viking helmets were simple, practical designs made of iron or leather, often with a nose guard for added protection. These helmets were designed for battle, not for show. The idea of adding horns or wings would have been not only impractical but dangerous, as they could easily get caught on weapons or obstacles during combat. So how did this myth become so ingrained in popular culture? Part of the reason lies in the way history is often shaped by storytelling. The romanticized image of the horned Viking was far more dramatic and memorable than the reality, and it captured the public's imagination. Over time, this image was reinforced by everything from children's books to Hollywood movies, cementing the horned helmet as a symbol of the Viking Age. The truth is, Vikings were far more sophisticated and practical than the horned helmet stereotype suggests. Their real headgear reflects their focus on functionality and survival rather than theatricality. This example reminds us that history is often shaped by the stories we tell, and sometimes those stories can lead us astray. As we continue to explore the many ways historians have been proven wrong, this myth serves as a fascinating case of how art and imagination can rewrite history, at least in our mind. Now turning to our fourth example, let's delve into one of the most notorious scientific hoaxes in history, the Piltdown Man. In the early 20th century, a fossil discovery in England was hailed as the missing link between apes and humans, a groundbreaking find that promised to rewrite our understanding of human evolution. The Piltdown Man, as it came to be known, was presented as a skull with both human and ape-like features, suggesting it was the long-sought transitional species. For decades, it was celebrated as a key piece of evidence in the study of human origins, but the truth was far more shocking. In the 1950s, advanced scientific techniques revealed that the Piltdown Man was an elaborate forgery. The skull was a clever combination of a human cranium and an orangutan's jaw, artificially aged to appear ancient. The teeth had been filed down and the bones stained to mimic the appearance of fossils. The entire discovery was a fraud, meticulously crafted to deceive the scientific community. The impact of the Piltdown Man hoax was profound. For over 40 years, it misled researchers and distorted the study of human evolution. Paleoanthropologists had based theories and interpretations on this fake fossil, only to have their work undermined when the truth came to light. The hoax also exposed vulnerabilities in the scientific process, highlighting how even experts can be swayed by confirmation bias, the tendency to favor evidence that supports pre-existing beliefs. The Piltdown Man scandal taught the scientific community valuable lessons about the importance of rigorous testing and skepticism. It underscored the need for multiple lines of evidence and peer review to validate discoveries. Today, the story of the Piltdown Man serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that even in the pursuit of knowledge, we must remain vigilant against deception and error. As we continue to uncover the many ways historians and scientists have been proven wrong, the Piltdown Man stands as a stark reminder of how easily even the most respected fields can be led astray. Now turning to our fifth example, let's challenge one of the most enduring myths in history, the idea that Christopher Columbus was the first to discover America. For centuries, this narrative has been taught as fact, portraying Columbus as the brave explorer who unlocked the New World for Europe. But the truth is far more complex and reveals a history that predates Columbus by centuries. Long before Columbus set sail in 1492, the Americas were already home to thriving indigenous civilizations, from the Aztecs and Maya in Central America to the Inca in South America and countless tribes across North America. These societies had rich cultures, advanced agricultural practices, and complex political systems. They were not undiscovered lands waiting for European arrival. They were vibrant, interconnected communities with their own histories. But Columbus wasn't even the first European to reach the Americas. Archaeological evidence, such as the remains of a Norse settlement at Elance Aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, proves that Viking explorers led by Leif Erikson had established a foothold in North America around the year 1000. This settlement, though short-lived, demonstrates that Europeans had set foot on American soil nearly 500 years before Columbus. So how did the Columbus myth take hold? The answer lies in the way history was written and taught. Columbus's voyages were heavily promoted by European powers, particularly Spain, as a symbol of exploration and conquest. His discovery became a cornerstone of national pride and colonial expansion. Over time, this narrative was reinforced in textbooks, literature, and popular culture, overshadowing the contributions of indigenous peoples and earlier explorers like the Vikings. The perpetuation of this myth has had profound implications. It has marginalized the histories of indigenous peoples, framing their lands as new and empty to justify colonization. It has also distorted our understanding of pre-Columbian history, ignoring the achievements and resilience of the civilizations that flourished long before European contact. By revisiting this myth, we gain a more accurate and inclusive understanding of history. It reminds us that the story of the Americas is not one of a single discovery, but a tapestry woven from the experiences of countless peoples over thousands of years. As we continue to uncover the truths behind historical misconceptions, the Columbus myth serves as a powerful example of how narratives can shape and sometimes distort our understanding of the past. Now turning to our sixth example, let's re-examine the notion of the Dark Ages as a time of ignorance and intellectual stagnation. For centuries, this period, roughly spanning from the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century to the beginning of the Renaissance in the 14th century, has been painted as a bleak era of cultural and scientific decline. But modern historians have challenged this view, revealing a far more nuanced and dynamic picture of the so-called Dark Ages. The term Dark Ages itself is a product of Renaissance thinkers who sought to glorify their own era as a rebirth of classical knowledge. By labeling the preceding centuries as dark, they created a stark contrast to highlight their achievements in art, science, and philosophy. This narrative was further reinforced during the Enlightenment, when thinkers used the term to criticize the medieval church and its perceived role in suppressing intellectual progress. But this portrayal is deeply misleading. In reality, the Middle Ages were a time of significant innovation and cultural exchange. Advances in agriculture, such as the development of the heavy plow and the three-field system, revolutionized food production and supported population growth. Architectural marvels like Gothic cathedrals, with their intricate designs and engineering feats, stand as enduring symbols of medieval ingenuity. Monastic communities played a crucial role in preserving and copying ancient texts, ensuring that the knowledge of antiquity was not lost. Scientific inquiry also flourished in unexpected ways. Scholars like Hildegard of Bingen made groundbreaking contributions to medicine and natural science, while Islamic scholars in the medieval world translated and expanded upon Greek and Roman texts, later reintroducing this knowledge to Europe. The establishment of universities in cities like Paris, Oxford, and Bologna laid the foundation for modern higher education, fostering intellectual debate and discovery. Even in the realm of art and literature, the Middle Ages were far from stagnant. The epic poems of Beowulf and the Song of Roland, the illuminated manuscripts of the Book of Kells, and the intricate metalwork of the Sutton who treasures all testify to a vibrant cultural life. Far from being a period of darkness, the Middle Ages were a time of creativity, resilience, and progress. Modern historians have worked to correct this outdated view, emphasizing the continuity and complexity of medieval history. By shedding the label of the Dark Ages, we gain a deeper appreciation for the achievements of this era and the ways in which it laid the groundwork for the Renaissance and beyond. This reinterpretation reminds us that history is rarely as simple as it seems, and that every age has its own light to shine. Now turning to our seventh example, let's address the exaggerated accounts of Aztec human sacrifice, a topic often sensationalized and used to justify the Spanish conquest of the Americas. For centuries, the Aztecs have been portrayed as a bloodthirsty civilization obsessed with ritual sacrifice, a narrative heavily promoted by Spanish conquistadors and chroniclers. But modern archaeology and ethno-historical research have revealed a far more complex and nuanced picture of Aztec society and its religious practices. The Spanish conquistadors, eager to legitimize their conquest and conversion efforts, often exaggerated the scale and brutality of Aztec sacrifices. Accounts from the time describe tens of thousands of victims being sacrificed annually, with graphic depictions of hearts being torn out and blood flowing down temple steps. While human sacrifice was indeed a part of Aztec religious rituals, these descriptions were likely inflated to serve a political agenda, painting the Aztecs as barbaric and justifying their subjugation. Archaeological evidence tells a different story. Excavations at major Aztec sites, such as the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, have uncovered remains that suggest sacrifices were conducted on a much smaller scale than previously claimed. These findings align with ethno-historical research, which draws on indigenous sources and oral traditions to provide a more balanced view. Far from being a society driven solely by violence, the Aztecs had a rich and sophisticated culture with a deep spiritual connection to their gods. Human sacrifice, while shocking to modern sensibilities, was deeply embedded in the Aztec worldview. It was seen as a sacred duty to sustain the gods and maintain cosmic balance. The Aztecs believed that the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world, and in return, humans owed them a debt of life. Sacrifices were often tied to agricultural cycles, warfare, and major religious festivals, reflecting the interconnectedness of life, death, and renewal in Aztec cosmology. Moreover, the Aztecs were not unique in practicing human sacrifice. Many ancient civilizations, including the Maya, the Inca, and even the Celts, engaged in similar rituals. What sets the Aztecs apart is the way their practices were weaponized by colonial powers to dehumanize them, and erase their cultural achievements. Modern historians emphasize the importance of understanding Aztec society on its own terms, rather than through the biased lens of its conquerors. By re-evaluating the evidence, we gain a more accurate understanding of the Aztecs as a complex civilization with advanced systems of governance, art, and science. Their achievements in architecture, astronomy, and agriculture are now recognized as remarkable contributions to human history. This reinterpretation challenges us to move beyond simplistic stereotypes and appreciate the richness of Aztec culture, reminding us once again that history is rarely as black and white as it seems. Now turning to our 8th example, let's explore the Salem Witch Trials, a dark chapter in American history often attributed to mass hysteria. For centuries, the trials were seen as a straightforward case of superstition and fear spiraling out of control, leading to the execution of 20 innocent people in Salem, Massachusetts in the late 17th century. But recent research has revealed that the story is far more complex, with multiple factors contributing to the tragedy. The traditional narrative paints the Salem Witch Trials as a product of mass hysteria, fueled by religious fervor and paranoia. Accusations of witchcraft spread rapidly, with neighbors turning against neighbors, and even children accusing adults of consorting with the devil. The trials were marked by sensational testimonies, spectral evidence, and a lack of due process, resulting in a wave of executions and imprisonments. For a long time, historians accepted this explanation, viewing the events as a cautionary tale about the dangers of irrational fear. However, modern scholars have begun to challenge this simplistic view, uncovering evidence that points to a combination of social, economic, and even environmental factors. One compelling theory suggests that ergot poisoning caused by a fungus that grows on rye may have played a role. Ergot produces toxins that can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and other symptoms eerily similar to those described by the accusers in Salem. If the local grain supply was contaminated, it could explain some of the bizarre behaviors and accusations that fueled the trials. Beyond biological factors, social tensions and economic disputes also contributed to the chaos. Salem Village, where the trials began, was deeply divided along class and religious lines. Wealthier families often clashed with poorer ones, and long-standing grudges found an outlet in the accusations of witchcraft. Women, particularly those who were outspoken or independent, were disproportionately targeted, reflecting broader anxieties about gender roles and power dynamics in the community. The reinterpretation of the Salem Witch Trials has profoundly changed our understanding of the event. It's no longer seen as a simple case of mass hysteria, but rather as a complex interplay of environmental, social, and psychological factors. This shift reminds us that historical events are rarely the result of a single cause, and that understanding them requires a nuanced, multidisciplinary approach. By revisiting the Salem Witch Trials with fresh perspectives, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of human behavior and the ways in which fear, prejudice, and environmental conditions can intersect with devastating consequences. This reinterpretation not only enriches our understanding of the past, but also offers valuable lessons for the present, reminding us to question simplistic narratives and seek out the deeper truths behind historical events. Now turning to our 9th example, let's explore the myth of the Wild West, a romanticized vision of American history that has captivated imaginations for generations. The popular image of the Wild West as a lawless frontier, filled with gunfights, outlaws, and untamed wilderness, is deeply ingrained in our cultural consciousness. But this portrayal is far from the reality of life in the American West during the 19th century. The myth of the Wild West owes much of its existence to Hollywood and dime novels, which transformed the region into a stage for dramatic tales of heroism and chaos. Films and books often depicted the West as a place where rugged individualism reigned supreme, and law enforcement was either absent or ineffective. Iconic figures like cowboys, sheriffs, and outlaws became larger-than-life symbols of freedom and danger, perpetuating the idea that the West was a land of endless opportunity and constant peril. However, historians have shown that the reality was far more complex and far less chaotic. The American West was not a lawless wasteland, but a region shaped by organized communities, diverse cultures, and significant contributions from women. Towns and settlements often had established legal systems, and many communities were built around cooperation and mutual support rather than constant conflict. Women played crucial roles in these communities, not only as homemakers but also as entrepreneurs, educators, and activists, helping to shape the social and economic fabric of the West. Diverse cultures also played a significant role in the development of the region. Native American tribes, Mexican settlers, African American pioneers, and immigrants from Europe and Asia all contributed to the rich tapestry of the American West. Their stories, often overlooked in popular narratives, reveal a history of resilience, adaptation, and cultural exchange that challenges the simplistic image of the Wild West as a white-dominated frontier. The myth of the Wild West has had a lasting impact on how we view American history, often overshadowing the more nuanced and inclusive reality. By revisiting this period with a critical eye, we can appreciate the contributions of all who shaped the West and recognize the ways in which popular culture has distorted our understanding of the past. This reinterpretation not only enriches our knowledge of history, but also reminds us of the importance of questioning the stories we tell about ourselves and our world. As we move forward, this exploration of the Wild West invites us to reconsider the narratives we've inherited and to seek out the deeper, more complex truths that lie beneath the surface of our collective memory. Now turning to our 10th example, let's address the enduring myth that the Great Wall of China is visible from space. This claim has been repeated so often that it's become a widely accepted fact, even though it's entirely false. The idea that the Great Wall is the only human-made structure visible from space has captured the imagination of many, but the reality is far less dramatic. The myth likely originated in the early 20th century, when space travel was still a distant dream and people speculated about what might be visible from such a great height. Over time, this speculation turned into a popular belief, reinforced by textbooks, media, and even some astronauts who mistakenly repeated the claim. However, modern science and first-hand accounts from astronauts have thoroughly debunked this idea. From low Earth orbit, the Great Wall is not visible to the naked eye. Its width, color, and materials blend into the surrounding landscape, making it indistinguishable from the natural terrain. Even from the Moon, the wall is completely invisible, as no human-made structures can be seen from that distance. The true significance of the Great Wall lies not in its visibility from space, but in its historical and cultural importance. Stretching over 13,000 miles, the wall is a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the Chinese people. Its construction began over 2,000 years ago during the Qin dynasty, and continued through various dynasties, with each adding to its length and complexity. The wall was not a single continuous structure, but a series of fortifications built to protect against invasions and raids from nomadic tribes to the north. The construction of the Great Wall was a monumental feat of engineering, involving millions of laborers, soldiers, and prisoners. Materials varied depending on the region, with some sections built from tamped earth, others from stone, and still others from bricks. Watchtowers, barracks, and signal stations were strategically placed along the wall to enhance its defensive capabilities. Despite its military purpose, the wall also served as a symbol of unity and strength, reflecting the power and ambition of the Chinese empires that built it. Today, the Great Wall stands as one of the most iconic landmarks in the world, attracting millions of visitors each year. Its historical significance extends beyond its original purpose, offering insights into the political, social, and technological advancements of ancient China. By dispelling the myth of its visibility from space, we can focus on the wall's true legacy, a remarkable achievement of human effort and a lasting symbol of cultural heritage. This example reminds us that even the most widely accepted beliefs can be based on misconceptions, and it's our responsibility to seek out the truth behind the stories we tell. Now turning to our 11th example, let's challenge the widely held belief that the fall of Rome was a single dramatic event. For centuries, the idea of Rome's collapse has been portrayed as a sudden catastrophe, often symbolized by the sacking of the city by the Visigoths in the year 410, or the deposition of the last Roman emperor in 476. However, modern historians have shown that the fall of the Roman Empire was not a single moment but a gradual process shaped by a complex interplay of economic, military, and social factors. The decline of Rome began long before the traditional dates associated with its fall. Economic troubles such as inflation, heavy taxation, and a reliance on slave labor weakened the empire's financial stability. The Roman economy struggled to sustain its vast territories, and as resources became scarcer, the empire's ability to maintain its infrastructure and military strength diminished. At the same time, political instability and frequent changes in leadership further eroded the empire's cohesion. Military challenges also played a significant role in Rome's decline. The empire faced constant threats from external invaders, including Germanic tribes, the Huns, and other groups. The Roman legions, once the most formidable fighting force in the ancient world, became overstretched and underfunded. The empire's borders were increasingly difficult to defend, and repeated invasions disrupted trade, agriculture, and daily life. Internal conflicts such as civil wars and power struggles among rival factions further weakened Rome's ability to respond to external pressures. Social changes within the empire also contributed to its gradual decline. The Roman population faced widespread inequality, with a small elite controlling much of the wealth while the majority struggled with poverty. The spread of Christianity, while eventually becoming a unifying force, initially created divisions within Roman society. Traditional Roman values and institutions began to erode, and the empire's cultural identity shifted as it absorbed influences from the diverse peoples within its borders. The reinterpretation of Rome's fall as a gradual process has reshaped our understanding of this pivotal period in history. Rather than viewing it as a sudden collapse, historians now see it as a transformation, a slow unraveling of an empire that had become too vast and complex to sustain itself. This perspective highlights the resilience of Roman culture and institutions, which continued to influence Europe long after the empire's political power had faded. The legacy of Rome endured in the form of language, law, architecture, and religion, shaping the development of Western civilization for centuries to come. By understanding the fall of Rome as a gradual decline rather than a single event, we gain a more nuanced view of history. It reminds us that the rise and fall of civilizations are rarely the result of one dramatic moment, but are instead shaped by a multitude of interconnected factors. This example challenges us to look beyond simplistic narratives and explore the complexities that define historical change. Now turning to our 12th example, let's unravel the enduring myth surrounding Marie Antoinette and her infamous quote, "Let them eat cake." This phrase has become a symbol of aristocratic indifference and is often cited as evidence of the French queen's callous disregard for the suffering of her people. However, historians have long argued that Marie Antoinette never actually uttered these words, and the origins of the quote reveal a much more complex story. The phrase, "let them eat cake," first appeared in the writings of philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who mentioned it in his autobiography, Confessions, published in 1782. Rousseau attributed the remark to an unnamed great princess, but he wrote this decades before Marie Antoinette even arrived in France. By the time the French Revolution began in 1789, the quote had been falsely linked to the Queen, likely as part of a broader campaign to vilify her and the monarchy. Marie Antoinette's reputation as a frivolous and out-of-touch ruler made her an easy target for such accusations. Her lavish lifestyle, including her extravagant spending on fashion and entertainment, fueled public resentment during a time of economic crisis. However, there is no historical evidence to suggest she ever made such a statement. In fact, contemporary accounts describe her as being deeply concerned about the plight of the poor, even if her efforts to help were often misguided or ineffective. The myth of "let them eat cake" has had a lasting impact on how we perceive Marie Antoinette and the French Revolution. It has come to represent the perceived arrogance and detachment of the aristocracy, contributing to the narrative that the revolution was a necessary response to centuries of oppression. While the revolution was indeed driven by widespread inequality and discontent, the misattribution of this quote has overshadowed the more nuanced realities of Marie Antoinette's life and reign. By debunking this myth, historians have shed light on the ways in which propaganda and misinformation can shape historical narratives. Marie Antoinette's story serves as a reminder that history is often written by those in power, and the truth can be distorted to serve political agendas. This example challenges us to question the stories we think we know and to seek a deeper understanding of the individuals and events that have shaped our world. Now turning to our 13th example, let's explore the fascinating misconception that the Inca civilization lacked a written language. For centuries, it was widely believed that the Inca, one of the most advanced pre-Columbian societies, relied solely on oral traditions to preserve their history and manage their vast empire. However, this assumption overlooks the ingenious system of quippers, intricate knotted strings, that served as a sophisticated method of record-keeping and communication. Quippers, often referred to as talking knots, were made up of colored cords with various types of knots tied at specific intervals. Each knot, color, and position held meaning, allowing the Inca to record numerical data, track resources, and even convey narratives. This system was so effective that it enabled the Inca to administer their empire, which spanned thousands of miles across diverse terrains with remarkable precision. Modern researchers have made significant strides in decoding quippers, revealing their complexity and versatility. While much of the numerical data has been deciphered, the linguistic and narrative aspects remain a challenge. Recent studies suggest that quippers may have encoded more than just numbers, potentially including names, events, and even poetry. This discovery has reshaped our understanding of Inca civilization, highlighting their intellectual achievements and challenging the notion that they were a pre-literate society. The ongoing efforts to decode quippers underscore the importance of re-examining historical assumptions. What was once dismissed as a primitive tool is now recognized as a testament to the Incas' ingenuity and adaptability. By correcting this misconception, historians are not only honoring the legacy of the Inca, but also reminding us that the absence of a familiar writing system does not equate to a lack of sophistication. This example invites us to reconsider how we define and recognize literacy and communication across cultures. The Incas' use of quippers demonstrates that knowledge can be preserved and transmitted in ways that defy conventional expectations, offering a richer and more inclusive understanding of human history. Now turning to our 14th example, let's re-examine the reign of Mary I of England, a monarch whose legacy has been heavily shaped by the label Bloody Mary. For centuries, Mary has been remembered primarily for her persecution of Protestants, earning her a reputation as one of England's most ruthless rulers. However, this one-dimensional portrayal overlooks the complexities of her reign and the broader historical context in which she ruled. Mary ascended to the throne in 1553, becoming England's first queen regnant. Her reign marked a significant moment in English history as she sought to restore Catholicism after her father, Henry VIII, had broken away from the Roman Church. While her efforts to reverse the Protestant Reformation led to the execution of nearly 300 individuals, it's important to understand the political and religious turmoil of the time. England was deeply divided, and Mary's actions were driven by a desire to stabilize the nation and reclaim what she saw as its rightful spiritual path. Beyond her religious policies, Mary achieved notable successes during her reign. She strengthened England's financial system, reformed the navy, and laid the groundwork for future maritime exploration. Her marriage to Philip of Spain, though controversial, was an attempt to forge a powerful alliance that could bolster England's position in Europe. Additionally, Mary's reign saw the first steps toward establishing a more centralized and efficient government, which would later be expanded by her sister Elizabeth I. The label Bloody Mary was largely propagated by Protestant writers after her death, who sought to vilify her as a cautionary tale against Catholic rule. This biased narrative has overshadowed her achievements and the challenges she faced as a woman ruling in a male-dominated society. Modern historians are increasingly re-evaluating her reign, recognizing that her legacy is far more nuanced than the simplistic, bloody epithet suggests. By revisiting Mary's story, we gain a more balanced understanding of her reign and the difficult choices she made. Her life reminds us that history is often written by the victors, and that the labels we assign to historical figures can obscure the full picture. As we continue to explore these misconceptions, we uncover the layers of complexity that define our past. Now turning to our 15th example, let's challenge the enduring myth that Australia's interior was an empty, uninhabited wilderness before European colonization. This misconception has long been used to justify the expansion of colonial settlements, but the truth reveals a far richer and more complex history. For centuries, the idea of the Australian interior as a vast, barren land devoid of human presence was perpetuated by European explorers and settlers. This narrative conveniently ignored the deep connection that indigenous Australians had with the land, as well as their sophisticated systems of land management and settlement. Archaeological evidence and oral histories from indigenous communities paint a very different picture, one of thriving societies that had lived in and cared for the interior for tens of thousands of years. Indigenous Australians developed intricate methods of managing the land, including controlled burning to promote plant growth and prevent wildfires, as well as the creation of complex water systems to sustain life in arid regions. These practices not only supported their communities but also shaped the landscape in ways that European settlers failed to recognize. The so-called empty interior was in fact a carefully maintained environment that reflected the deep knowledge and stewardship of its indigenous inhabitants. The myth of the empty interior served a specific purpose for colonial powers. By portraying the land as uninhabited and unused, settlers could justify their claims to it under the legal doctrine of terra nullius, or land belonging to no one. This allowed for the displacement of indigenous peoples and the seizure of their lands without acknowledgement of their rights or sovereignty. The consequences of this myth were devastating, leading to the loss of lives, cultures, and connections to the land that had been nurtured for millennia. Modern historians and archaeologists are working to correct this narrative, uncovering evidence of indigenous settlements, trade networks, and land management practices that challenge the colonial myth. By acknowledging the rich history of the Australian interior, we not only honor the resilience and ingenuity of indigenous peoples, but also confront the injustices that were perpetuated under the guise of an empty land. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the importance of questioning the stories we've been told and seeking out the voices and perspectives that have been marginalized or erased. The myth of the empty Australian interior is just one example of how history can be shaped to serve the interests of the powerful, but it also shows us the power of truth to reshape our understanding of the past. Now turning to our 16th example, let's examine the myth of the Immaculate Conception of the United States, a narrative that portrays America's founding as a flawless and harmonious event. This idealized version of history often glosses over the darker realities of slavery, the displacement of indigenous peoples, and the intense political conflicts that shaped the nation's early years. For generations, the story of America's founding has been framed as a heroic struggle for liberty and democracy, with figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson cast as infallible leaders. However, this narrative conveniently omits the fact that the same leaders who championed freedom also owned enslaved people, and that the nation's independence was built on the forced removal and suffering of indigenous communities. The Declaration of Independence, while a groundbreaking document, was written by men who did not extend its promises of equality to all. The institution of slavery was deeply embedded in the economic and social fabric of the early United States, yet this reality is often downplayed in traditional accounts of the nation's founding. Enslaved Africans were forced to build the wealth of the new nation, yet their contributions and struggles were erased from the story. Similarly, the displacement of indigenous peoples through violent conflicts and broken treaties is often treated as a footnote rather than a central part of America's history. Political conflicts also played a significant role in shaping the early United States, yet these are often simplified or romanticized. The debates over the Constitution, for example, were not just about lofty ideals but also about power, compromise, and the protection of economic interests. The Federalist and anti-Federalist factions clashed over issues like states' rights, taxation, and the balance of power, revealing the messy and contentious nature of the nation's founding. Modern historians are challenging this sanitized version of history, uncovering the complexities and contradictions that define America's origins. By examining primary sources, oral histories, and archaeological evidence, they are shedding light on the experiences of enslaved people, indigenous communities, and marginalized groups who were excluded from the traditional narrative. This re-evaluation not only provides a more accurate picture of the past, but also forces us to confront the legacies of inequality and injustice that persist today. The myth of the Immaculate Conception of the United States serves as a reminder that history is rarely as simple or heroic as it seems. By questioning this idealized narrative, we gain a deeper understanding of the challenges and contradictions that shape the nation, and the work that remains to build a more inclusive and equitable future. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the importance of seeking out the full story, even when it complicates the myths we hold dear. Now turning to our 17th example, let's explore the myth of the samurai as always noble warriors, a romanticized image that has been deeply ingrained in popular culture. The samurai are often portrayed as paragons of honor, loyalty, and martial skill, bound by the strict code of Bushido. However, this idealized depiction overlooks the complex and often contradictory realities of their role in Japanese history. While it's true that many samurai adhered to principles of honor and discipline, their lives were far from the flawless image we often see in movies and books. Samurai were deeply involved in political intrigue, often serving as enforcers for powerful warlords or daimyo. They played key roles in the power struggles that defined feudal Japan, sometimes betraying their lords or switching allegiances to advance their own interests. The Sengoku period, in particular, was marked by constant warfare and shifting alliances, where survival often took precedence over ideals. Another aspect often omitted from the romanticized narrative is the samurai's relationship with the peasant class. While they were expected to protect and govern, many samurai exploited the peasants under their control, imposing heavy taxes and harsh punishments. Peasants were often treated as little more than property, their labor and resources used to sustain the samurai's lifestyle. This exploitation was a far cry from the noble protector image often associated with the samurai. Internal conflicts within the samurai class also reveal a more nuanced picture. Rivalries between clans and factions frequently erupted into violence, and the pursuit of power often led to brutal infighting. The famous tale of the 47 Ronin, often celebrated as a story of loyalty and revenge, also highlights the darker side of samurai culture, where personal vendettas and rigid adherence to honor could lead to tragic consequences. The myth of the samurai as always honorable warriors was largely shaped by later cultural narratives, particularly during the Meiji Restoration and the early 20th century. As Japan modernized and sought to forge a national identity, the samurai were romanticized as symbols of Japan's martial spirit and moral integrity. This idealized image was further popularized through literature, theater, and eventually film, cementing the samurai's place in the global imagination. Modern historians are challenging this one-dimensional portrayal, uncovering the complexities of samurai life and their impact on Japanese society. By examining historical records, letters, and accounts from the time, they reveal a class of warriors who were as much political players and oppressors as they were noble protectors. This re-evaluation not only provides a more accurate understanding of the samurai, but also invites us to question the myths that shape our perception of history. The myth of the samurai as always noble warriors reminds us that history is rarely as simple as the stories we tell. By peeling back the layers of romanticized narratives, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of the past and the lessons they hold for the present. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the importance of seeking out the full story, even when it challenges the myths we hold dear. Now turning to our 18th example, let's challenge the myth of the eureka, a moment in science, the idea that groundbreaking discoveries happen in sudden flashes of insight. This romanticized notion, often depicted as a lone genius having a brilliant revelation, overlooks the collaborative, incremental, and often messy process of scientific progress. While stories like Isaac Newton's apple or Albert Einstein's theory of relativity have become iconic, they simplify the complex reality of how science truly advances. Take the famous tale of Newton and the apple. According to popular legend, Newton was sitting under an apple tree when an apple fell, inspiring him to formulate the laws of gravity. While this story is memorable, it glosses over the years of study, experimentation, and collaboration that led to Newton's groundbreaking work. His discoveries were built on the foundations laid by earlier scientists like Galileo and Kepler, and his own meticulous observations and calculations. The apple, if it even fell, was just one small part of a much larger intellectual journey. Similarly, Albert Einstein's theory of relativity is often portrayed as the result of a sudden, solitary insight. In reality, Einstein's work was the culmination of years of research, influenced by the work of other physicists like Hendrik Lorentz and Henri Poincaré. His famous equation, E equals mc squared, didn't emerge fully formed in a single moment of inspiration. Instead, it was the result of rigorous mathematical exploration and a deep engagement with the scientific questions of his time. The myth of the eureka, a moment, also obscures the collaborative nature of science. Many of history's greatest discoveries were the result of teamwork, debate, and the sharing of ideas. The development of the double helix structure of DNA, for example, involved the combined efforts of James Watson, Francis Crick, Rosalind Franklin, and Maurice Wilkins. Franklin's X-ray diffraction images were crucial to the discovery, yet her contributions were often overshadowed in the popular narrative. This highlights how the eureka myth can erase the vital role of collaboration and the contributions of underrepresented figures in science. Moreover, scientific progress is rarely linear. Breakthroughs often come after years of trial and error, failed experiments, and incremental advances. Thomas Edison, for instance, famously said of his work on the light bulb, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This persistence and willingness to learn from failure are hallmarks of the scientific process, yet they are often left out of the eureka narrative. By debunking the myth of the eureka moment, we gain a more accurate understanding of how science works. It's not about lone geniuses having sudden flashes of insight, but about the collective effort of countless individuals building on each other's work over time. This perspective not only honors the true nature of scientific discovery, but also encourages us to value collaboration, perseverance, and the incremental steps that lead to progress. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, we are reminded that the stories we tell about science and history often simplify the complexities of human achievement. By looking beyond the myths, we gain a deeper appreciation for the hard work, collaboration, and persistence that drive innovation and discovery. And with that, we move forward to our next example, where we'll uncover another fascinating historical myth that has shaped our understanding of the past. Now turning to our 19th example, we delve into the myth of the lost cause of the Confederacy, a revisionist narrative that claims the American Civil War was fought over states' rights rather than slavery. This myth, which emerged in the decades following the war, sought to reframe the Confederacy's motives and downplay the central role of slavery in the conflict. By examining how this narrative was constructed and perpetuated, we can better understand its lasting impact on how the Civil War is remembered and interpreted today. The lost cause narrative gained traction in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, largely through the efforts of former Confederate leaders, writers, and organizations like the United Daughters of the Confederacy. These groups promoted the idea that the South fought not to preserve slavery, but to defend states' rights and a noble way of life. They portrayed Confederate soldiers as heroic defenders of liberty, while minimizing or outright denying the brutal realities of slavery. This narrative was reinforced through textbooks, monuments, and popular culture, shaping the way generations of Americans understood the war. One of the key claims of the lost cause myth is that the Confederacy was motivated by constitutional principles, particularly the right of states to govern themselves. While states' rights were a factor in the political tensions of the time, the historical record makes it clear that slavery was the central issue. The secession documents of Southern states explicitly cite the preservation of slavery as their primary reason for leaving the Union. For example, Mississippi's Declaration of Secession stated, "Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world." Similarly, South Carolina's declaration accused northern states of failing to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act, which they saw as a direct threat to their way of life. The lost cause myth also romanticized the antebellum South, portraying it as a land of genteel plantations and harmonious race relations. This idealized image ignored the violence, exploitation, and dehumanization that were inherent to slavery. By presenting the Confederacy as a noble cause, the myth sought to justify the actions of the South and obscure the moral and economic realities of the institution it fought to protect. The impact of the lost cause narrative extends far beyond the Civil War itself. It has influenced modern perceptions of the war, contributing to the persistence of Confederate symbols and monuments in public spaces. These symbols, often defended as part of Southern heritage, are deeply tied to the myth's glorification of the Confederacy and its denial of slavery's central role. In recent years, debates over the removal of Confederate statues and the renaming of military bases have brought the legacy of the lost cause into sharp focus, highlighting how this myth continues to shape discussions about race, history, and identity in the United States. By debunking the myth of the lost cause, we can confront the uncomfortable truths of the Civil War and its aftermath. The war was fundamentally about slavery, and acknowledging this fact is essential to understanding the full scope of its impact on American society. This perspective also allows us to recognize the contributions and struggles of African Americans who fought for their freedom and played a crucial role in shaping the nation's future. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the power of narratives to shape our understanding of the past. The myth of the lost cause is a stark example of how history can be rewritten to serve particular agendas, and it underscores the importance of critically examining the stories we tell. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll uncover another myth that has shaped our understanding of history in surprising ways. Now turning to our 20th example, we explore the myth of the medieval church opposing science, a misconception that has long shaped our understanding of this period. Contrary to popular belief, the medieval church was not an enemy of scientific progress. In fact, it played a significant role in preserving and advancing knowledge during a time often dismissed as the Dark Ages. By re-examining the relationship between the church and science, we can uncover a more nuanced and accurate picture of this era. The myth that the medieval church stifled science largely stems from Enlightenment-era critiques, which sought to contrast the perceived backwardness of the Middle Ages with the intellectual achievements of their own time. Thinkers like Voltaire and others portrayed the church as an oppressive force that suppressed free inquiry and innovation. While these critiques were influential, they often overlooked the church's active role in fostering education and scientific exploration. During the medieval period, the church was one of the primary institutions responsible for preserving ancient texts and promoting learning. Monasteries served as centers of scholarship, where monks meticulously copied and studied works by Greek and Roman thinkers, as well as early Christian theologians. These efforts ensured that knowledge from antiquity was not lost but instead passed down to future generations. Universities, which began to emerge in the 12th and 13th centuries, were often founded under the auspices of the church and became hubs of intellectual activity. Subjects like astronomy, mathematics, and natural philosophy were integral parts of the curriculum, and many scholars were clergymen who saw no conflict between their faith and their pursuit of knowledge. One notable example of the church's support for science is the work of figures like Roger Bacon, a 13th-century Franciscan friar and philosopher. Bacon emphasized the importance of empirical observation and experimentation, laying the groundwork for the scientific method. Similarly, Thomas Aquinas sought to reconcile faith and reason, arguing that the natural world could be understood through both divine revelation and human inquiry. These thinkers, among others, demonstrate that the medieval church was not opposed to science but rather engaged with it in ways that reflected the intellectual currents of the time. The myth of the church opposing science also overlooks the fact that many scientific advancements of the medieval period were made possible by church patronage. For instance, the development of accurate calendars, improvements in agricultural techniques, and advancements in architecture, such as the construction of Gothic cathedrals, all relied on scientific knowledge supported by the church. Even the infamous trial of Galileo, often cited as evidence of the church's hostility to science, was more complex than commonly portrayed. While Galileo's heliocentric views did clash with certain church authorities, it's important to note that many within the church were open to new ideas and engaged in scientific debates. By debunking the myth of the medieval church opposing science, we gain a clearer understanding of how knowledge was preserved and advanced during this period. The church's role in education and scholarship laid the foundation for the scientific revolution that would follow, challenging the notion that the Middle Ages were a time of intellectual stagnation. This reinterpretation also highlights the importance of critically examining historical narratives, as they often reflect the biases and agendas of later periods. As we continue to uncover these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the complexity of the past and the ways in which our understanding of it evolves. The myth of the medieval church opposing science is just one example of how history can be distorted over time, and it underscores the need to approach historical claims with a critical eye. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll explore another myth that has shaped our understanding of history in unexpected ways. Now turning to our 21st example, we delve into the myth of the Silk Road as a single, unified trade route. This misconception paints a picture of a single, well-defined path stretching from China to the Mediterranean, but the reality is far more intricate and fascinating. The Silk Road was not a single road, but a vast network of interconnected trade routes that spanned continents, linking the East and West in a complex web of economic and cultural exchange. The idea of the Silk Road as a single route likely stems from its romanticized portrayal in popular culture and early historical accounts. However, modern historians have revealed that it was a sprawling network of land and sea routes with multiple branches and pathways that shifted over time due to political, environmental, and economic factors. These routes connected major cities, trading hubs, and cultural centers, facilitating the movement of goods, ideas, and people across vast distances. The economic significance of the Silk Road cannot be overstated. It was the lifeblood of trade between civilizations, enabling the exchange of luxury goods like silk, spices, precious metals, and gemstones. But it wasn't just about material wealth. The Silk Road also facilitated the transfer of technologies, agricultural practices, and scientific knowledge. For example, paper making, gunpowder, and the compass, all of which originated in China, spread to the West through these routes, profoundly shaping the course of history. Culturally, the Silk Road was a melting pot of civilizations. It brought together diverse peoples, languages, and religions, fostering a rich exchange of ideas and traditions. Buddhism traveled from India to China and beyond, while Islamic art and architecture influenced regions as far as Central Asia and Europe. The Silk Road also played a crucial role in the spread of Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and other faiths, creating a tapestry of religious and cultural diversity that still resonates today. Modern historians study the Silk Road through a variety of methods, including archaeology, textual analysis, and the examination of artifacts. Excavations at sites like Dunhuang in China and Samarkand in Uzbekistan have uncovered manuscripts, artworks, and everyday objects that shed light on the lives of those who traveled and traded along these routes. Additionally, the study of ancient texts such as travel accounts and merchant records provides valuable insights into the economic and social dynamics of the Silk Road. By correcting the myth of the Silk Road as a single route, we gain a deeper appreciation for its complexity and significance. It was not just a path for trade, but a bridge between civilizations, shaping the cultural and economic landscapes of the ancient world. This reinterpretation also highlights the importance of viewing history through a multifaceted lens, recognizing the interconnectedness of human societies across time and space. As we continue to unravel these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the richness and diversity of our shared past. The Silk Road stands as a testament to the power of connection and exchange, challenging us to rethink how we understand the flow of history. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll explore another myth that has shaped our understanding of the world in unexpected ways. Now turning to our 22nd example, we confront the myth of the Black Death as a European-only plague. This widespread belief paints the Black Death as a catastrophe that devastated Europe in the 14th century, leaving other regions untouched. However, the reality is far more global and interconnected. The Black Death, one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, did not confine its devastation to Europe. It ravaged Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa as well, reshaping societies across continents. The misconception that the Black Death was a European phenomenon likely stems from the extensive documentation of its impact in European sources, such as chronicles, artworks, and medical texts. These records vividly depict the horrors of the plague, from mass graves to the collapse of social order, creating a lasting image of Europe as the epicenter of the disaster. However, modern historians have uncovered evidence that the plague originated in Central Asia, possibly in the steppes near modern-day Kyrgyzstan, before spreading westward along trade routes, including the Silk Road. In Asia, the Black Death left a trail of devastation. China, already grappling with political instability and famine, saw its population plummet as the plague swept through its cities and rural areas. The Mongol Empire, which facilitated trade and movement across Eurasia, inadvertently helped spread the disease. In the Middle East, cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad suffered catastrophic losses. Contemporary accounts from Arab historians describe streets filled with the dead and a collapse of economic and social systems. North Africa, too, was not spared, with regions like Tunisia and Morocco experiencing significant population declines. The global impact of the Black Death challenges the Eurocentric narrative that has long dominated historical accounts. By recognizing its widespread reach, we gain a more accurate understanding of the pandemic as a truly global event. This reinterpretation also sheds light on the interconnectedness of medieval societies, highlighting how trade, travel, and conquest facilitated the spread of disease across vast distances. The myth of the Black Death as a European-only plague has shaped our understanding of pandemics in significant ways. It has often led to a narrow focus on Europe's experience, overshadowing the equally devastating effects on other regions. This skewed perspective has influenced how we study and prepare for modern pandemics, emphasizing the need for a global approach to public health. By examining the Black Death in its full geographical context, we are reminded of the importance of considering diverse experiences and perspectives in historical and contemporary analyses. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, the Black Death serves as a powerful reminder of humanity's vulnerability to disease and the enduring impact of global connections. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll uncover another myth that has shaped our understanding of history in unexpected ways. Now turning to our 23rd example, we revisit the myth of the Mayan collapse as a sudden and catastrophic event. For decades, the narrative surrounding the decline of the Maya civilization has been one of abrupt downfall, often attributed to a single cause, such as warfare or environmental disaster. However, modern research reveals a far more complex and gradual process, shaped by a combination of environmental, political, and social factors. The Maya civilization, known for its remarkable achievements in architecture, mathematics, and astronomy, thrived in Mesoamerica for centuries. By the 9th century, many of their great cities, such as Tikal and Capon, had been abandoned, leading to the popular belief that the Maya experienced a sudden collapse. This idea was reinforced by dramatic depictions in popular media and early archaeological interpretations, which focused on the visible ruins and the apparent abandonment of urban centers. However, recent studies have shown that the decline of the Maya was not a single event but a series of challenges that unfolded over time. Environmental factors played a significant role, with evidence pointing to prolonged droughts that strained agricultural systems and water resources. These droughts, exacerbated by deforestation and soil depletion, likely led to food shortages and social unrest. At the same time, political instability and warfare between city-states weakened the Maya's ability to respond to these crises. Rivalries and conflicts disrupted trade networks and alliances, further destabilizing the region. Social factors also contributed to the gradual decline. As resources became scarce and living conditions deteriorated, populations may have migrated to more sustainable areas, leading to the abandonment of urban centers. This migration, combined with the breakdown of centralized authority, resulted in a shift from large, organized cities to smaller, more dispersed communities. Importantly, the Maya civilization did not disappear entirely. Many aspects of their culture, language, and traditions persisted among their descendants, who continue to live in the region today. This reinterpretation of the Mayan collapse challenges the simplistic narrative of a sudden and total downfall. Instead, it highlights the resilience and adaptability of the Maya people in the face of multiple challenges. By understanding the decline as a gradual process, we gain a more nuanced perspective on the complexities of societal change and the interplay of environmental, political, and social factors. The myth of the Mayan collapse as sudden has shaped our understanding of ancient civilizations in significant ways. It has often led to a focus on dramatic events and single causes, overshadowing the intricate dynamics that drive historical change. This revised understanding not only deepens our appreciation for the Maya civilization, but also offers valuable lessons for addressing modern challenges such as climate change and social instability. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, the story of the Maya serves as a reminder of the importance of examining history in all its complexity. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll uncover another myth that has shaped our understanding of history in unexpected ways. Now turning to our 24th example, we delve into the myth of the Victorian era as a time of strict sexual repression. For many, the Victorian period conjures images of rigid moral codes, prudish behavior, and a society that shunned open discussions of sexuality. However, this stereotype is far from the full story. In reality, the Victorian era was a time of diverse sexual attitudes and practices, many of which challenged the popular narrative of repression. The Victorian era, spanning the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901, is often portrayed as a period of extreme conservatism, particularly when it comes to matters of sex. This image has been reinforced by later moralistic narratives, which sought to contrast the perceived purity of the Victorian age with the perceived moral decline of the 20th century. However, historical evidence paints a much more complex picture. Contrary to the stereotype, the Victorian era saw a wide range of sexual behaviors and attitudes. While public discourse often emphasized propriety and restraint, private lives told a different story. Diaries, letters, and court records reveal that many Victorians engaged in premarital sex, extramarital affairs, and even same-sex relationships. The era also saw the rise of underground publications and erotic literature, which catered to a growing appetite for sexual content. Brothels and sex work were widespread, particularly in urban areas, and were often tolerated as a necessary part of society. One of the most striking examples of this duality is the proliferation of medical and scientific discussions about sex. The Victorian era witnessed the emergence of sexology, a field dedicated to the study of human sexuality. Pioneers like Richard von Krafft-Ebing and Havelock Ellis published groundbreaking works that explored topics such as sexual desire, gender identity, and sexual deviance. While these works were often controversial, they reflect a society grappling with the complexities of human sexuality rather than one that simply repressed it. The myth of Victorian sexual repression was largely shaped by the moralistic narratives of the early 20th century. As society underwent rapid changes, including the rise of feminism and the sexual revolution, the Victorian era was often portrayed as a time of backwardness and repression. This narrative served to highlight the progress of the modern age, but it also obscured the rich and varied sexual landscape of the Victorian period. By debunking this myth, we gain a more nuanced understanding of the Victorian era and its complexities. It reminds us that history is rarely as black and white as it is often portrayed, and that societal attitudes toward sex are shaped by a multitude of factors, including culture, politics, and economics. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, the story of Victorian sexuality serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of looking beyond stereotypes to uncover the full truth. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll uncover another myth that has shaped our understanding of history in unexpected ways. Now turning to our 25th example, we explore the myth of the Spanish Inquisition's brutality, a topic that has long been shrouded in exaggeration and sensationalism. Popular culture often depicts the Spanish Inquisition as a relentless and bloodthirsty institution, responsible for countless executions and widespread terror. However, modern research has revealed a far more nuanced and less brutal reality, challenging the dramatic narratives that have dominated our understanding of this historical period. The Spanish Inquisition was established in 1478 by Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile, with the initial goal of maintaining Catholic orthodoxy in their kingdoms. While it is true that the Inquisition was a powerful and often feared institution, its reputation for extreme violence has been significantly overstated. Historical records show that the number of executions carried out by the Inquisition was much lower than commonly believed. Over its 300-year existence, it is estimated that between 3,000 and 5,000 people were executed, a figure that pales in comparison to the tens of thousands often cited in popular accounts. One of the key factors behind the exaggerated perception of the Inquisition's brutality is the influence of propaganda. During the 16th and 17th centuries, Protestant writers and critics of Spain often portrayed the Inquisition as a symbol of Catholic tyranny and oppression. These accounts, which were widely circulated, painted a picture of an institution that was far more violent and arbitrary than it actually was. This narrative was further amplified in later centuries by Enlightenment thinkers, who used the Inquisition as a cautionary tale against religious intolerance and authoritarianism. Modern historians have also highlighted the political and religious context of the time, which helps explain the Inquisition's actions. The late 15th and 16th centuries were periods of intense religious and political upheaval in Spain. The Reconquista, the expulsion of Jews and Muslims, and the rise of Protestantism in Europe all contributed to a climate of fear and suspicion. The Inquisition was, in many ways, a response to these challenges, aimed at preserving social order and religious unity. While its methods were often harsh, they were not as indiscriminate or excessively violent as later accounts would suggest. Another important aspect of the Inquisition's operations was its legal procedures. Contrary to popular belief, the Inquisition followed a formal legal process which included the right to defense and the use of evidence. Trials were conducted by trained officials, and sentences were often commuted to lesser punishments, such as fines, penance, or exile. While torture was used to extract confessions, it was not as widespread or as brutal as often depicted, and its use was regulated by strict guidelines. By re-examining the Spanish Inquisition, we gain a more balanced understanding of its role and impact. While it was undoubtedly a tool of religious and political control, its reputation for extreme brutality has been shaped more by myth than by historical reality. This example reminds us that history is often more complex than the stories we tell about it, and that our understanding of the past is constantly evolving as new evidence comes to light. With this in mind, we move forward to our next example, where we'll uncover another myth that has shaped our understanding of history in unexpected ways. Now turning to our 26th example, we delve into the myth of the Native American noble savage, a stereotype that has long distorted our understanding of indigenous cultures. This romanticized image portrays Native Americans as inherently pure, simple, and living in perfect harmony with nature, often stripped of their complexity and humanity. While this portrayal may seem flattering on the surface, it reduces diverse and sophisticated societies to a one-dimensional caricature, ignoring their rich histories, innovations, and struggles. The concept of the noble savage emerged during the European Enlightenment, as thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau used the idea to critique their own societies. By idealizing indigenous peoples as living in a state of natural virtue, these thinkers created a narrative that, while seemingly positive, was ultimately dehumanizing. It erased the vast diversity of Native American cultures, which ranged from the highly organized empires of the Aztecs and Incas to the nomadic tribes of the Great Plains. Each of these groups had their own unique traditions, political systems, and ways of life, none of which fit neatly into the simplistic noble savage archetype. This myth also served a darker purpose. It was used to justify colonialism by framing Native Americans as childlike and incapable of managing their own lands. European colonizers argued that they were saving indigenous peoples from themselves. This paternalistic attitude allowed settlers to seize land, impose foreign laws, and dismantle native societies under the guise of benevolence. The myth of the noble savage thus became a tool of oppression, masking the violence and exploitation that defined colonial expansion. Modern historians and anthropologists have worked to dismantle this stereotype, revealing the true complexity of Native American cultures. For example, the Iroquois Confederacy, a political alliance of 6 nations in what is now the northeastern United States, developed a sophisticated system of governance that influenced the framers of the U.S. Constitution. Similarly, the agricultural practices of the Mississippian cultures, such as the cultivation of maize, beans, and squash, supported large, thriving communities long before European contact. These achievements highlight the ingenuity and resilience of indigenous peoples, qualities that the noble savage myth obscures. By challenging this stereotype, we not only honor the true diversity of Native American cultures, but also confront the ways in which myths have been used to justify historical injustices. This example reminds us that history is not just about the stories we tell, but also about the stories we choose to ignore or distort. As we continue our journey through these historical misconceptions, we'll uncover even more ways in which myths have shaped and misled our understanding of the past. Now turning to our 27th example, we explore the myth of the Industrial Revolution as a sudden, dramatic transformation that reshaped the world overnight. This common narrative paints the Industrial Revolution as a rapid shift from agrarian societies to industrialized powerhouses, marked by the sudden appearance of factories, steam engines, and urban centers. However, historians now understand that this period was far more gradual, unfolding over decades and even centuries, with roots that stretch back long before the 18th century. The Industrial Revolution is often associated with Britain in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, but its foundations were laid much earlier. Innovations in agriculture, such as crop rotation and selective breeding, increased food production and freed up labor for other industries. Similarly, advancements in technology, like the spinning jenny and the water frame, didn't emerge in a vacuum. They built on centuries of incremental progress in mechanics and engineering. Even the steam engine, often seen as the symbol of the Industrial Revolution, was the result of decades of experimentation and refinement by inventors like Thomas Newcomen and James Watt. This gradual process also varied widely across regions. While Britain is often seen as the birthplace of industrialization, other parts of Europe and the world experienced these changes at different times and in different ways. For example, the textile industry in India and China had already developed sophisticated manufacturing techniques long before the Industrial Revolution began in Europe. This global perspective challenges the idea that industrialization was a sudden, European-led phenomenon, highlighting instead a more complex and interconnected history. The myth of the Industrial Revolution as a sudden change also overlooks the social and economic struggles that accompanied it. The transition to industrial society was not smooth or universally beneficial. Workers faced harsh conditions in factories, child labor was widespread, and urbanization led to overcrowded cities with poor sanitation. These challenges were not the result of a sudden shift, but rather the culmination of long-term changes that unfolded over generations. By recognizing the gradual nature of the Industrial Revolution, we gain a more nuanced understanding of its impact on both economic growth and human suffering. This reinterpretation has reshaped how historians view the Industrial Revolution, emphasizing continuity over rupture. It reminds us that history is rarely defined by sudden, dramatic events, but rather by the slow accumulation of changes over time. As we continue to uncover the complexities of this pivotal period, we gain a deeper appreciation for the interconnected forces that have shaped our modern world. With this in mind, let's move forward to our next example, where we'll examine another historical misconception that has shaped our understanding of the past. Now turning to our 28th example, we delve into the myth of gladiators as always fighting to the death in brutal, no-holds-barred combat. This dramatic image, popularized by Hollywood films and sensationalized stories, paints gladiators as doomed warriors destined to perish in the arena. However, historical evidence reveals a far more nuanced reality, where gladiatorial combat was often a carefully regulated spectacle, and death was far from guaranteed. Gladiators were highly trained professionals, and their matches were more akin to modern sports than the chaotic bloodbaths often depicted in movies. These fighters were expensive investments for their owners, who trained and maintained them at great cost. As a result, most matches were designed to showcase skill and entertainment rather than end in death. Rules and referees ensured that fights were conducted fairly, and many gladiators survived their careers, sometimes even retiring with fame and wealth. The idea of gladiators as doomed warriors likely stems from the Roman practice of holding occasional munera or funeral games, where prisoners or condemned criminals were forced to fight to the death. These events, however, were distinct from professional gladiatorial combat. The confusion between the two has been perpetuated by Hollywood, which often blends historical elements for dramatic effect. Films like Gladiator and Spartacus have cemented the image of the arena as a place of constant carnage, overshadowing the more regulated and often non-lethal nature of most gladiatorial matches. This myth also reflects a broader tendency to sensationalize history, emphasizing violence and drama over accuracy. By understanding the true nature of gladiatorial combat, we gain a clearer picture of Roman society and its values. The arena was not just a place of brutality, but also a stage for skill, spectacle, and even social mobility. Gladiators could become celebrities, admired for their prowess and courage, and their matches were a way for Romans to celebrate discipline, honor, and entertainment. As we continue to uncover the realities of gladiatorial combat, we are reminded of the importance of questioning popular narratives and seeking a deeper understanding of history. With this in mind, let's move forward to our next example, where we'll explore another historical misconception that has shaped our understanding of the past. Now turning to our 29th example, we challenge the myth of the Renaissance as a sudden and universal cultural rebirth. Often portrayed as a dramatic explosion of art, science, and learning that swept across Europe, the Renaissance is frequently depicted as a sharp break from the so-called Dark Ages. However, this narrative oversimplifies a much more complex and gradual process, shaped by regional variations and long-standing cultural developments. The Renaissance did not happen overnight, nor did it affect all of Europe uniformly. Instead, it was a slow evolution building on centuries of medieval scholarship, trade, and cultural exchange. For example, the rediscovery of classical texts, often credited as a hallmark of the Renaissance, had already begun in the 12th century through contacts with the Islamic world. Similarly, advancements in art and architecture were influenced by earlier Gothic traditions and the gradual accumulation of knowledge and techniques over time. Moreover, the Renaissance unfolded differently across regions. While Italy is often seen as the epicenter of this cultural movement, other parts of Europe experienced their own unique renaissances at different times. In Northern Europe, for instance, the Renaissance was deeply intertwined with religious reform and the rise of humanism, while in Spain, it was shaped by the Reconquista and the blending of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish cultures. These regional variations highlight the diversity of the Renaissance, challenging the idea of it as a single, unified phenomenon. The myth of the Renaissance as a sudden cultural awakening can be traced back to the 19th century, when historians like Jacob Burckhardt popularized the idea of the Renaissance as a distinct and revolutionary period. This narrative was further reinforced by the Enlightenment's emphasis on progress and the rejection of the medieval past. Over time, this view became ingrained in popular culture, shaping our understanding of European history as a linear progression from darkness to light. By re-examining the Renaissance as a gradual and multifaceted process, we gain a more nuanced understanding of this pivotal era. It reminds us that history is rarely as neat or dramatic as we imagine, and that cultural change often unfolds over generations, influenced by a wide range of factors. As we continue to explore these historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the importance of questioning oversimplified narratives and embracing the complexity of the past. With this in mind, let's move forward to our final example, where we'll uncover another myth that has shaped our understanding of history. Now turning to our 30th and final example, we address the widely held belief that the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the sole reason Japan surrendered, effectively ending World War II. While the bombings were undoubtedly catastrophic and played a significant role, the narrative that they alone ended the war overlooks other critical factors that contributed to Japan's decision to surrender. One major factor was the Soviet Union's declaration of war against Japan on August 8, 1945, just 2 days after the bombing of Hiroshima. The Soviet invasion of Japanese-occupied Manchuria dealt a devastating blow to Japan's military strategy. With the Soviets advancing rapidly and the Japanese army stretched thin, the prospect of fighting a two-front war became untenable. This intervention shattered any hope Japan had of negotiating a conditional surrender through Soviet mediation, a strategy they had been pursuing for months. Additionally, Japan was already facing severe internal struggles by the summer of 1945. Years of relentless Allied bombing campaigns had crippled Japan's industrial capacity and infrastructure. Food shortages were widespread and the civilian population was suffering immensely. The Japanese government was deeply divided, with some factions advocating for surrender while others insisted on fighting to the bitter end. The atomic bombings, while horrific, were not the only factor pushing Japan toward capitulation. They were, in many ways, the final blow in a series of overwhelming pressures. The myth that the atomic bombs alone ended World War II has had profound implications for how we perceive nuclear warfare. It has often been used to justify the use of nuclear weapons as a decisive and necessary tool to end conflicts quickly. However, this oversimplified narrative ignores the complex interplay of military, political, and social factors that led to Japan's surrender. It also obscures the devastating human cost of the bombings, which claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of civilians and left lasting scars on survivors and their descendants. By re-examining this pivotal moment in history, we gain a more nuanced understanding of the events that shaped the end of World War II. It reminds us that history is rarely the result of a single action or decision, but rather the culmination of multiple forces and circumstances. As we conclude our exploration of these 30 historical misconceptions, we are reminded of the importance of questioning oversimplified narratives and embracing the complexity of the past. History is not a static story but an evolving conversation, shaped by new evidence, perspectives, and interpretations. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the myths and truths of history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more fascinating explorations of the past. Now turning to our conclusion, we reflect on the 30 remarkable examples of historical misconceptions we've explored together. From the myth of the flat Earth to the oversimplified narrative of the atomic bombs ending World War II, Each story has revealed how history is far more complex and dynamic than we often assume. These examples remind us that what we think we know about the past is constantly being reshaped by new discoveries, fresh perspectives, and a deeper understanding of the evidence. History is not a fixed story but an ongoing conversation. It challenges us to question long-held beliefs, to dig deeper, and to embrace the nuances that make the past so fascinating. As we've seen, even the most widely accepted narratives can be overturned when we take a closer look. This is the beauty of history. It invites us to stay curious, to keep learning, and to remain open to the possibility that there's always more to uncover. So, what does this mean for you, the viewer? It means that the next time you hear a historical fact or story, take a moment to wonder, is this the full picture? Could there be more to this story? By asking these questions, you become part of the ever-evolving journey of understanding our past. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of 30 times historians were proven wrong. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more fascinating historical mysteries. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What historical misconception surprised you the most? Share your favorite moments in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning the stories we tell about our world.